Stacks on her mind, grinding all day, hustle refined, chattering ceiling, G steers and untamed. Boss is her title, wealth is her game. Power in heels or sneakers on deck. Respect comes easy when you earn that check. From boardroom to businesses, she's got finesse. This woman right here, built for success. She's a bad bitch, and she signs checks. Built her own throne, what you expect? Dreaming real big, no limit, no stress. She's a bad bitch, and she signs checks. Oh, money moves, yeah, she runs the show. Hiring queens, now let them know.
Welcome back to the High Earning Women podcast, where we make financial conversations accessible, and it's really empowering you to make confident financial decisions so that you can live the life you truly deserve and you should want for yourself. And I'm your host, Jackie Porter, and you probably know by now, I love setting the stage for our podcast with a song that I think fits our theme for today. So we've been listening to the sounds of Georgia Smith. How many of you know her? She's amazing. Anyway, the song we've been jamming to is The Greatest Gift. And I just thought this was a perfect theme for the song, for the podcast that we're going to do today, because when it comes to the greatest gift, there's actually really nothing more precious, I feel. I'm not a parent myself, but I know that the parents that I talk to tell me how precious it is to be a parent. And I just hear from parents that even though it's probably the greatest gift in their lifetime, it's also one of the hardest things that they're going to do while they're on this earth, right? Because no matter what your income is, no matter what your zip code is, or even your tax bracket, in our case, postal code, if you're a parent, you just can't escape the challenges that come with being a parent, right? Especially if your child is struggling with something like depression or trauma or addiction. And that's a reality for so many families, especially in the aftermath of the pandemic. I've been speaking to parents since after the pandemic about how much more their child is dealing with depression. And I think it's something that actually we don't talk about enough. So I've got the perfect guest for us today to guide us through this important conversation. Christy, I'm so honored to have you here. She is a seasoned foster care manager, trauma specialist, and an advocate for families that are actually navigating these super tough realities. And you've been on the front lines, right? Supporting parents, caregivers, and young people through some of probably their darkest days. So Christy, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here.
Thank you, Jackie, so much. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to have this conversation with you. I think that, I totally agree with what you're saying. We don't talk enough about how folks are dealing with their feelings and thoughts and emotions. And COVID was an incredibly isolating time for people, and people are still actually, deciding what life looks like post-COVID for them, even though it's been a couple of years now. So thank you for having me.
I think we actually have a collective trauma, and then our children are dealing with their own probably trauma as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. I think you're right. It's something that we're generationally going to be dealing with, everybody who's been going through this. So I would love, actually, because I deal with a lot of high earning women, and the women listening today are probably managing their careers while juggling household responsibilities, trying to stay on top of their investments. And I know for a fact that behind closed doors, some of them are also managing children who are also hurting. And I just wanted to know, for those of you listening who might be at the beginning of realizing something is wrong, what are some of the early signs that, parents should look for to know that their child is struggling with depression, trauma, or even addiction?
That's such a great question. I think that the thing that I would say to all parents and caregivers is to notice differences, right? Where your young person, if you're seeing that they are withdrawing or they're not having the same enthusiasm as they used to about things that they love to enjoy. They maybe loved art or STEM or music, and they're disconnected from those things and disconnected from folks in their lives. If you see mood swings, if you see them pulling away, them being aggressive, for example, or not following through with tasks that they used to do, even their own self-care. If they're struggling to get out of bed, they're struggling to follow through with bathing, notice just sort of the things that you were accustomed to seeing. Now, some of that might be, depending on the age of the young person, a transition into adolescence. But even with adolescence, it's critical that we be patient and persistent with them and try to maintain that connection, because this is the time when they're trying to develop their autonomy and figure out who they are, but they still need guidance and support. And so I would say that for parents and caregivers looking for some signs, you really want to stay curious, and you want to be open to listening. And I would say manage your own sense of urgency. And one of the ways that parents and caregivers can do that is by asking, what am I feeling in this moment? Like, are we asking about depression? Are we asking about addiction or trauma or even suicide thought? What am I feeling, so that I can first regulate my own emotions before I get into this conversation with my young person to be able to best support them. And I would say to your listeners, the most important thing you can be is present and listening. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to fix everything for them. You just won't be able to. But be curious, stay curious and observant.
Yeah, that's probably something that I'm just seeing when you say that. I'm just seeing how many people who might be dealing with a child that has these issues. And the first thing I thought of is sort of separating your feelings from what the child might be experiencing, so that you kind of own your own stuff and maybe whatever's triggering you about that. I think that's so important for a person who's dealing with a young person struggling to first face that. And then, if you're realizing, okay, this is stuff I need to own myself, what's my child going through? Has things changed with how they're acting? As you were saying, has their routine changed? And then being present. I think that's so crucial. And it's so easy to, especially if you got a lot of things going on as a high earning woman, to be distracted, like really be present to what's going on in your child's life. So now that we've talked a little bit about that, Christy, some of the other pieces that I see is there's this facade, I think, that a lot of high earning women in general have, where they feel like they have to be perfect. Everything has to be going well, and they have to project that. And I think when they're dealing with a child that has struggles, it's a lot of shame, and it's a lot of secrecy. Like, they don't feel like they have anybody they can talk to about it. And I think it feels like they feel like they've done something wrong. So how do we dismantle some of this secrecy and the shame that comes to, our children having a mental health struggle or a substance struggle, so that they can discuss and they can get the help they need, their child can get the help that they need?
Well, I think the very first thing, just picking up on what you were saying, Jackie, is that, when we're talking about presence too, and the distraction of, high achieving women, right? One of the ways that we message inadvertently that we're not available to our young people is by being on devices. And so
Wow.
Yeah. So if we are on a cell phone, if we've gone down that social media rabbit hole or something like that, then we are messaging to everyone around us that we are not available because we are engaged in that screen or that tablet or something like that. And so I think that one of the ways we dismantle it is we try not to, I think it's really important not to pathologize things that are just sort of typical child development, right? I think that there is a pressure in society now for people to be perfect. I know that within, online groups and stuff, there's shaming of caregivers and mothers and those kinds of things. And we need to get away from that, because no one is perfect. I've yet in my 30-year career to meet a perfect family, see a perfect relationship or anything, like that. And so I think we also want to be careful about not picking up terms or labels for things that are, yes, my child or young person is struggling. They're struggling with some anxious feelings, or they're struggling with some feelings of depression. And so it's about being vulnerable and finding the right people who are not going to be judgmental, to really, try to figure out, what's happening with your young person. Is it just that they're trying to find their way? Is there something more kind of untoward happening? Are they being bullied? Are they struggling with their self-esteem? And also giving yourselves permission as parents and caregivers that this is the time when your young people are making mistakes. And this is the best thing you can do as a parent or caregiver is to sit with them in discomfort and help them, figure out what is going on for them, right? And so, to answer your question, we can utilize the supports that are around us. We can reach out if we have a pediatrician. We can reach out to local therapists. We can look at, really, it starts with hearing from the young person what it is that they're going through. And then there's many ways that we can start to connect with our young people to see what it is they need in that moment, but also not feel that we have to fix them. Because I think that there's this idea that even when if I take my child to a therapist, they're going to fix them. Well, no, a good therapist is not going to do that. A good therapist is going to help them find a safe expression of their emotions, walk with them, and help the young person find the answers within themselves. So all the people, I think that there's so much stigma around therapy. Well, I'm broken, so I have to go to therapy. And that's why young people resist it at times. And it's not that anybody's broken. It's that there's so many voices. And so how do we help our young people to find their own inner voice, to know they're okay to make mistakes, and for parents to feel like it's okay for my young person to make a mistake? They can fail and learn from that opportunity, right? And so, as
you say that, I just feel like they're watching us, right? And seeing how we handle failure and we handle not being perfect. So I really love the fact that you say we need to separate our own issues from our child's issues so we can be present for them. And I just love the fact that you talk about really being off our devices, because I actually have had this conversation with friends and they're like, we're addicted to our technology too. So we kind of have to own that. And so if our child's struggling with, being on technology, we have to, look in the mirror and say, well, are they copying us, right? Maybe we have to have a conversation about that. Say, yeah, you know what? We need to take a break and put it down for supper or whatever, just like we're asking you to, because we realize that we have this issue. But it's really about having, as you said, those vulnerable conversations, recognizing none of us is perfect. And we're all looking for ways to grow and just be better human beings, or, as you said, listening to what's going on inside of it.
Yeah, and just really find ways of coping, So often if you think about just the way we greet people, oh, how are you doing? It's super easy to say fine. Right. I don't ask people that. I ask people how they're coping, and then they're forced to answer differently.
I'll remember that. Noted. How are you coping? I love that.
Because how are you doing? I'm fine. I'm fine. Our young people are often also telling us they're fine. But, to your initial question, they're fine, but they're locked behind closed doors, but they're in social media. So we don't know who's accessing them. Right. And I think your point about how do we put the devices away? I'm out at restaurants seeing 4 people together, 4 phones, and I'm like, why are you out? You know what I mean? How are you engaging? How are you even learning how to communicate? And really just the biggest part of communication is actually listening, right? We, in Chinese culture, it's 2 ears and a heart. That is the reflection of listening, right? There's nothing about the mouth in there, right? And listening, not to respond, listening to confirm what I just heard you say is true. and that we have the same understanding before we, go off. So I think, in a high achieving society, there's a message that vulnerability is weakness. But to me, vulnerability is authenticity. And so who can we be authentic with? So when people are looking to talk about struggles with their young people, who can they honestly have that conversation with? Like, I've worked with mothers who've had losses. So then when they're feeling frustrated with certain parts of parenting, which is a natural feeling, they
Right.
feel like they can't because they worked so hard to get the child. And so
Right.
how do we create spaces in our community where we're honest about our fatigue and our needing to tag in those other supports?
Yeah, and I think as well, like, I grew up in the 70s where we had a much larger support system. Everybody kind of looked out for each other in the neighborhoods that everybody was your parent, everybody was in your business. And I think that, just the world we live in now, I feel like parents are probably more on their own in this whole parenting game, and then a much smaller support system, not the neighbor, not, the person next door, or aunts and uncles that might live closer. So it's a much smaller circle of people. So it's easier to get stressed when you're doing way more heavy lifting, right? And as you're saying, it sounds like we just have to be honest to ourselves, honest to our children, hear them, be present, and of course, get off those damn devices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're saying about community is so true. We have all these ways to connect now, but people are so much more disconnected. And the facts are that in COVID, there was more deaths of despair than there were from COVID. Because because as human beings, we are designed to connect, whether that's an artificial connection or a legitimate one. And so when you see young people on video games or something like that, like reaching out through the internet, it's because they're designed to connect. And so we need to create spaces where they're connecting with positive influences, people who are going to have those honest conversations with them. So.
Yeah, and you say that, I think so. If we recognize that we have to be honest with ourselves, have more vulnerable conversations, seek, community or resources that help our child have conversations where they feel safe with people. Let's get practical for a minute. Like, if we are a parent, a mom, or and we realize that our child needs serious help, then I want to be clear. What should they do if they're already feeling overwhelmed financially or emotionally? Like, what are some practical things that they can do if they recognize their child actually needs serious help, and they're already in that place where they're like, I don't know what to do.
Right. So I will say that there's some really great resources out there that won't necessarily compromise people financially.
Right.
Connects Ontario is a 24/7 live service that can tell you who in your area is accepting clients for therapy. What are their rates? Do they have a sliding scale? Many therapy agencies who are qualifying psychotherapists or registered social workers have intern students that are available to provide therapy and have different specialties, and they're supervised by a skilled therapist to offer different, fees that are more accessible to folks. Kids Help Phone has a unlimited sort of list of resources, and you can go online. Someone reached out to me the other day and said, can you give me some videos on this? And I myself went on the Kids Help Phone website, and it was talking about how do we talk about feelings? How do we do this? That kind of thing. And I think that when you're looking for therapists, I have worked with many parents where the young person isn't ready to be in therapy. But the parent or caregiver is coming to learn how to communicate better, how to read the behavior. It's really critical that we separate every human being, but especially children and young people, from their behavior. None of us wants to be defined by our worst or best moments. And so when we see a behavior, we want to ask ourselves, what is underlying that behavior, right? And
Right.
some parents and caregivers have something set in place from a very early age where they say to their young person, if you bring me this note and you put it in my drawer, I will know we need to talk about something difficult, and
Ooh.
I will make myself available for that. Or if you put this item that we agreed is like, this is a big conversation item, you put it somewhere on my bedside table, then I'm ready. I'm going to come open and ready to hear what you have to say, non-judgmental. It gives the parent or caregiver the time to sort of prepare themselves. And then if the young person is open to therapy, it's about helping them find the right therapist, looking online within your means, and then most therapists will give you a free consultation so the young person can meet them virtually and ask them about their style, see something about their office or that kind of thing. So finding a therapist is kind of like trying on clothes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you have to be comfortable with the person and the style. Years ago, I was referred someone from another therapist, and they said I'm too soft. And I said, what are you saying? And they're like, well, they're looking for someone. I sort of gave them the gears. I knew what they meant, but they were looking for someone who is direct, right?
Right.
You want to look for someone, some therapists. I'm trained in a lot of things: trauma-informed CBT, dialectic behavior therapy, solution-focused therapy, person-brain training, suicide first aid training. But I don't apply therapies to people as a therapist. It's conversational. I'm present with them on this journey, asking them purposeful questions, sharing education. And so I think it's also, when we're looking for therapy, we use those resources around us, and then we find out what the young person's understanding is of therapy, right? Because sometimes young people don't understand that we all carry a backpack of thoughts, feelings, and emotions that no one can see.
Right.
And therapy is about bringing that backpack, or those 27 backpacks,
Right.
and taking out whatever is on your mind and deciding, am I still going to carry that? Or can I put it back in and it has less weight? Or can I leave it over here because I've processed it? People don't always know that trauma can be many things: car accident, loss of a pet. It can also be wanting for nothing but not feeling loved.
Wow. Honestly, so many different things, as you said, in this backpack that you might have to unpack.
Right.
If you're a child dealing with, some form of, depression, addiction, or whatever. And I think about some of the women who they're always trying to be prepared, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they have means. And so I'd love to talk about, if you have wealth and you have a child who has issues, how should you invest in caring for that child? Is it private therapy? Is it residential programs? Is it some other intervention? How can they make smart decisions? Because I think that's the other piece is, what should they be doing? Because they want to be prepared. They want to make sure they're looking at the right types of services to take care of their child emotionally. What are some things, or even preventatively, what are some potential things that they could be investing in to help their child as they even go through adolescence?
Yeah, I think that one of the things is that you have a few answers to that. So I'm going to start with where you have the means to work with your school. If you think your child needs an assessment, maybe they, have special needs, they require accommodations, those kinds of things. You can work with the school, where the school will pay for those things. And it takes longer to be on a list, but it's about at least $3,000 to do it privately, right? And so I think the beginning of that is being open to the idea of an assessment. And then secondly, being open to the idea that some of what you're seeing is adolescence, and is not. That's why I said we'd want to be careful not to pathologize.
Right.
And so is it, how are we creating a space for our young person to talk to us? Because the truth of the matter is, even if you get the greatest therapist in the world, they are 1 hour
That's right.
weekly or every few weeks. The therapeutic helpers are you. are the people doing the caring, are the people, and I think that for busy parents and caregivers, who are working and families and balancing those kinds of things, I think it's important to know that it's about quality. It is not about quantity, right? How do you put those devices away and then do something that the Lego, going for a walk, playing board games, it could be anything, going for a bike ride. How are you, that act alone shows your young person that they are valuable to you because they know you're busy. You have all these other demands in your life. And so how are we creating those quiet spaces where as a parent or caregiver, we say nothing. We say, I'm just checking in. Or even if you're, young person, they're in their room and they're on social media, then send them some stuff about that, that they're interested in to engage them and bring them out, trying to find ways. So I think that when we look at how we're investing in caring for our children, we have to first invest in ourselves because, residential and all of those things, you want to be careful about going too far with those things before you've just tried to build a safe, open relationship where you're really curious about what's going on. Because, I've worked with families where when they've spent 30 minutes a day with a young person who's struggling, it's changed the behavior because it's changed how they value themselves and how they see themselves. And so I'm not also naive to the fact that not every teenager is going to want to just spend time with you if that's the age that you're at.
Exactly.
Right. So, but in that way, then how can you contribute to the interest that your teenager has to support them in making positive choices, and also message to them that they're going to make mistakes and this is the safest time to do it.
Right.
So I think that people are so worried. We talk a lot about safety and those kinds of things, and all of us as human beings need psychological, emotional, physical, and environmental safety. But that doesn't mean we're going to wrap them in a bubble. It means that we are going to sit with them in the discomfort and we are going to help them learn safe expressions of emotions. And so, as well as ourselves, right? We're going to message I just need to take a beat here. I'm just going to go on a mad walk around the block because, right, I want to be present for this conversation and I'm feeling frustrated. Not at you, right? But how are we modeling for our young people the way that we're managing our own emotions? What do they see? Do they see we come home from work and blast everybody at home because we were on all day like they were at school? What are the kind of options? So I would say that there are different financial options, but I would first invest in, the home. Or
time. It sounds like time versus money isn't always going to, throwing money at something isn't always what I'm hearing from you, going to solve the problem. It could be spending more time or prioritizing your child and making them feel prioritized based on what you know about your child. It sounds like those are some probably the less expensive go-tos, along with you're saying, maybe an assessment in the school, if that's something that might be useful for the parent before spending the money themselves.
Yeah. And it's really also about, if you think about our young people, they're trying to figure out what they're contributing to the world. What are they good at? Right. And so we want to make sure, a friend of mine was telling me they had a elite hockey player, and their daughter had come home and said that when they asked in the change room, who do you play for? She was the only child that said she played for herself.
Really? Wow.
Everyone else. And so, we all have these unrealized dreams as adults. And so we want to make sure that the dreams of our young people fit our young people. And so that we're supporting what those are, even if it seems, I want to learn how to do hair. I want to learn STEM. I want to learn whatever, how are we really listening to what they're passionate about? And then helping them even, some of the therapeutic things for young people is being involved in healthy groups and, things like that. And then
what type of groups? Say that again. Sorry.
Like healthy groups where they feel
Healthy.
connected, right?
Okay.
We're all looking for a sense of belonging.
Right.
And some kids don't want groups. Like I know a lot of kids that for them, COVID was okay. They just got to stay home and not interact. But then how do we build their capacity to interact, right? Outside of a phone.
Yeah, it just really sounds like as a parent, you have to tune in, which means you have to make the space and time. And it sometimes can be very challenging for high achieving women to do that. And, I think one of the things I learned, even in my own childhood, is when it comes to unpacking your issues versus your child's issues, it just both often can trigger one another. And, the young child often learns from the parent how to trigger, right? So it sounds to me that often the whole family might need healing and not just the child, just
Absolutely.
based on that whole trajectory. And I just wanted to know if you had advice for mothers who are, trying to just figure it out, trying to hold it together. They're trying to be, as you said, they're holding this face of perfection and the shame that goes with it. How do they care for themselves as they go through this journey?
Well, I think self-care is really important. It's about finding a community that you can be real with that maybe is going through some of the same issues, or if you're venting them out, doesn't feel the need to solve them or comment on them and those kinds of things. And self-care can be many things. It can be your own participation in something. As I said before, I think that a lot of parents can really help their young people by themselves going to their own therapy, right? Because depending on the age of your young person, even if you get them into therapy, you do not get to know what happens in that therapy, right? And so what are the stories you're telling yourself when you look at their behavior? What do those things mean to you? And how are you confirming that that's actually not it? They don't, they do want to spend time with you, but they don't know how to sort of invite that time with you. And there are a lot of people that have a lot of things on. And so I will tell you that I did some of my best work as a social worker in a car. Adolescents love a car. They can't get out. But they don't have to look at you in the eye. You can use music, right? And you have the space to have those deep, real conversations and it's okay to say, I don't know, but you know what? Let's find somebody who does, or let's find someone who can help us through this. So I think self-care is important. Massage, I think community is important. Doing your own work is important. And then the self-talk that you have for yourself, right? I think that there's a lot of people that feel like they're failing. But if your young person is still there and they're still coming, even if they're coming and they have the worst attitude you've ever seen in your life, they're still coming. They're bringing that to you because you're their safe person. So instead of getting focused on their attitude, look what's underlying that behavior. What do they need? What am I feeling in the moment? I'm feeling annoyed by their attitude. What does my young person need in the moment? They need to connect with me. So I'm just going to be here and listen. Or I'm going to say nothing. Let's sit on the couch together and listen to some music and get, groove like we were doing at the beginning. Music is therapeutic, right? How can I just be real and say, listen, I'm here. Even if you don't want to talk, I'm here. I'm always someone you can talk to about those really difficult things.
I hear that and I just think what resonates for me is it's kind of creating that time and space for yourself as a self-care measure, and also creating that time and space for your child so that they know you're there no matter what and they can rely on you. And it's messy. It's all of the stuff seems really messy, and that's okay, right? And I would love if you have any last words of hope or advice for maybe a mom that's listening now who could use some words of encouragement as they go through this very choppy journey of parenting.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I will say about creating the time and space too, it's the language that you put to it, right? this is our time. This is what we're going to do. You know, the young person may not be willing to leave their phone at home, but could they put it down for this period of time? And we're going to do, you know, what you want to do. But in terms of like encouragement, I would say the fact that you're open to looking at how your interactions with your young person are impactful, and the fact that you are willing to have these conversations is really significant. That means you're doing a great job because, you know, you're open to it. I'm always impressed by parents and caregivers who understand that each child has to be given different care based on their needs. And it's okay to do something for yourself. You have to replenish yourself in order to have the energy to go through these times. Like I used to have a real response when people would say, put your mask on first, you know, in the airplane, right? But the truth is, if I don't, then I can't be helping the other people because I'll be passed out on the ground. And so I would say to, you know, your listeners, you know, the fact that you're open is amazing. Stay curious. And if you do nothing else, just that presence and listening, quality time. Don't feel pressured that it has to be a lot of time, but quality time where you are messaging, this is about you and me, or this is about you to your young person is going to make all the difference because they're going to know you're the person they can come to have those difficult conversations. And that, you know, you're going to figure out how to manage yourself when they say things that you don't really want to hear, right? Or they've made a mistake and you're like, oh no, my in-laws or my whoever is going to have some feelings about this. It doesn't matter. Everybody has their own timelines, and you can message that for yourself and for your young people. And as long as you're walking with them on the journey, you don't have to fix whatever problems are coming towards them. You just have to let them know you'll be there to work it through.
Honestly, Christy, thank you so much for your wisdom and your heart and your very powerful voice today. And I just wanted to say, like, as you were saying that, I was thinking about life is messy. The markets are messy. All of these things mean that you have to stay engaged and be consistent. So I just want to say to everyone listening, if you're walking through something heavy right now, it's important for you to know you're not alone. Strength doesn't actually mean pretending everything's okay. It actually means facing what's real, getting help actually when you need it, and taking care of yourself along the way. And if you're actually in a season where things are good, community is all about holding space for the woman next to you who might be carrying something you can't even see. Right, Christy?
Absolutely.
And I just want to know if this conversation moved you today, I'd be honored if you'd share it with a friend or leave a review or reach out to let us know how it resonated. We love your comments. And remember, you deserve to live a life that you love. And sometimes that begins with just allowing yourself to heal. And feel free, if you need support as you go through your financial journey, feel free to DM us. Remember, money is actually power, and you deserve to own yours. Until next time, High Earning Community, thank you again, Christy. This was awesome.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.